right, well, GM's Saab unit could find out whether it will survive in less than, well, I guess just about an hour from now. That's when a revised offer from Spyker Cars is set to expire. For more on Saab, GM, and the automaker's incoming CFO, let's bring in Bloomberg's David Welch. He joins us from Detroit. David, welcome. So let's start with Saab. I mean, Spyker apparently has made a revised bid for Saab. How likely is it, though, David, that Saab will be sold rather than closed?
Well, the last we heard from GM is that it was fairly unlikely because the issues were still pretty big, namely that some of the financing comes from Spyker's Russian partners, and GM was not really that enthusiastic about doing business with them. Whoever buys it, if somebody buys the entire company, GM is going to be supplying them parts and cars for some time. There's going to be a relationship ongoing for years into the future, so GM has to be comfortable with whoever that's going to be. Now, Spyker has adjusted their proposal. They've made some changes. If they can get GM comfortable enough with it, if they can show that they've got financing from other sources, then maybe they can get a deal done, but it still doesn't look all that likely at this point.
I mean, is that what GM's concerned about? I mean, what are GM's specific concerns, David, when it comes to Spyker making a bid here?
Well, they had, Spyker has some Russian investors, and GM isn't crazy about doing business with them. Remember, this was a key issue with Opel as well. It's not just an anti-Russian thing. They were going to sell Opel to Magna International, and their partner was a Russian bank. And there's a lot of ties between Russian financiers and other companies. Then you get into intellectual property issues with GM's car technology. They aren't all excited about that. So, you know, they could end up just winding this thing down because of, you know, some of these barriers that they just can't clear.
I mean, can Spyker clear those up for GM, resolve any of those concerns, or not likely?
What GM's telling me is that it's not all that likely. They'd really have to have, you know, financing from a bunch of other sources, and Spyker does have some investors, you know, who are involved with the Russians that GM doesn't want to do business with, apparently. So I'm not really sure how they would get around all of that, but that's what they're talking about. Spyker has an 11-point presentation that says they may be able to get around it. So
we'll see what happens, right? Whether they'll make this deadline or whether it'll be extended. Hey, let me ask you, though, David, about those GM executive changes, because that's something we've been following today. GM announcing Chris Liddell as CFO, Vice Chairman. That starts January 1st. I mean, what do we know about him?
Well, he comes from Microsoft. He was there for almost 5 years as their CFO. He's a New Zealander. He worked for International Paper Company before that. And that's what GM's board and the Chairman and CEO Ed Whitaker liked, is the guy has international experience in a number of different industries. One's in industrial, one, Microsoft, obviously has great success with consumers. So the CFO of General Motors is going to need both of those things. He's an engineer by training, so he understands how to make things. He's not just a numbers guy and a bean counter. So that will help. GM's management for years, top management and CFOs, has come out of the New York Treasury office. They've typically been bankers and accountants, and I think Ed Whitaker wants to go in a different direction, and bring in people with, you know, more industrial and you know, consumer type experience, and just get outside of the typical GM breeding ground.
Definitely an outsider there and an outside perspective. Hey, David, we got to leave it there. Thanks for the update on General Motors. We appreciate it. Bloomberg's David Welch.